Hello, hello, True Blue crew. It is so glad to be with you here on January 22nd of 2025. This is our weekly live sew and chat. So I take this time, set aside 1 hour per week dedicated to all of my various projects. And that way I am continually making progress. And you guys can just sit and sew. Let me know in the comments where you're joining in from, what you are working on this week. And I am just a touch distracted because my workspace camera didn't mute properly. And I was about to plug in a battery. And so that means I can't plug in headphones, stupid iPhone with the one universal port. So if you are hearing an echo, that's what it is. We will just play along and adapt. It is so good to see you, Rita. You're here in Arizona with me, correct? I am working on a Western feeling quilt here with all the dusty browns and the blues. Definitely reminds me of my desert landscape here in Arizona. Hope it's been a good week for everyone, and we will just get going. Let me tell you a little bit about this project. I got this kit from a guildmate. She wasn't going to finish it. It is called Dry Brush, and it's from Hancock's. There's a label there. But it was all Wilmington fabrics, I think. And it had this nice color-coded chart as I was arranging the fabrics. I think I was explaining in a previous video that I generally do not like to use such similar prints. Like this dark and light blue have the same kind of hash mark almost texture. So you can tell they're from the same line. And if I were picking out all the fabrics instead of using a kit, I would choose blues from different designers, different prints, so that I got a lot more scrappy texture in my quilt. But I'm using a quilt given to me by a friend, so I am not complaining at all. And I spent several of my open sewing sessions last year. I meet with groups, 2 different groups monthly at my local quilt shop, and I was able to put together all the blocks. And they are a combination of half square triangles and 9-patch units. So you can kind of see here, like this group of 4 with the brown, 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 and black, that was one 4-patch. And then I just had to go according to, let me find here was the layout diagram. You can see how it showed the blocks coming together to form the rows. And then I just laid it out on my design wall as a single row, paying very careful attention, and still made some mistakes and had to turn things around. But I did keep everything labeled. So on some of these, I just put some masking tape on when I was working with those first couple rows. So these are all pieced together. So I've got 2 rows at a time, and then I'll attach those later. And then I wanted to get all the rows together so that I wouldn't have to do that mental focus of trying to get things in the right place. Everything's all attached and labeled, so I can just sew some really long seams now. And what I did after I took my rows off the design wall, you can see the pins here. I numbered each row, and see that arrow? I made sure that I had a plan to press things in different directions. So one of my arrows points to the right and the other arrow points to the left. And that way, when I took the rows to the ironing board, I could follow the direction of my arrow, and now my rows will nest. And of course, these are very long rows. This quilt measures about 65. It's going to be about 72 inches square when I'm finished. And that uses all of my pins. So I could only get one row ready to go at a time, but I've got them all prepared here. And we are just going to sew those rows together, and I will make some progress on this UFO. I don't know that it necessarily fits the UFO status because I've been working on this pretty steadily over the last year. It hasn't taken too many breaks. Sometimes we think of those UFOs as abandoned projects. So this is more of a WIP, a work in progress, versus a UFO, which may have been abandoned for a while. But whatever you call it, it's going to get done and be a finished quilt here very soon. So I have one of my sets of rows all pinned together. I did that off camera before we started. And so now I am going to just sew that long row. I did go ahead and I pinned every single intersection along this row. So it will be a little bit slow as I have to stop as I go over the pins and take those out, but I wanted the finished quilt to match as much as possible with those intersections. I didn't want to have any jarring mistakes or imperfections there. Right off the bat, yeah. Come on, baby. It's so nice when a project gets to this point. When you have a big project that has a lot of similar blocks, it feels like you're just sewing and sewing and sewing and not making much progress. Movement warning as I shift that camera a little bit so I don't have to look behind me. And I'm just going carefully, making sure that I'm not going to hit my pins, but I don't necessarily need to take them out as long as my needle's not going to have a crash there. But I don't want to forget, so I will stop every so often and pull those pins out. Okay. I think this is going to be a fun project to put on the long arm as well, because there's some definite lines in the quilt. You can see these tan chains and the dark blue chains, and there's some really graphic square medallion type shapes in this quilt. So it will be fun to find some just kind of loopy designs, I'm thinking, across this quilt. Since it is such straight lines in the piecing, I like to use a loopy design in the quilting to continue to provide some contrast with your design. quilting is all about contrast, and most people think of that as the light and dark, but you can add contrast in the quilting designs you choose as well. Projects like this that have such strong graphic design in the fabrics would be also a good choice for a pantograph and edge to edge design, because the quilting may fade into the background anyway, so it doesn't need to be front and center. You know, a quilt that has a lot of negative space may have more room to put some of those intricate feathers and things. But with, especially with some of these darker brown fabrics, you're not going to see the quilting much. So it, you know, it's not a show quilt, so I can just be a little more casual with my quilting designs. But we'll see. It's going to be a while before I get to the quilting stage for this one. I had a nice email this morning from one of my viewers named Dawn. So, Dawn, if you're watching the replay, hello. She made a lovely Crown Royal quilt with the fabric bags, you know, that the whiskey bottles come in. And she just did a lovely job. It was a really nice quilt, and I love that she shared it with me. If you go way back on my channel, I did a Crown Royal project for a friend of mine a couple years ago. Hello, hello, Deb. Good to see you. I'm a little bit earlier than usual because I've got some other obligations tonight. So I just adjusted my work schedule a little bit and got online early. This is my sewing time is Wednesday whenever I finish work in the afternoon. I'm lucky to work from home and have a pretty flexible schedule. And heads up for next week, I will probably, if I can work it into my schedule, we'll have a breakfast time sew and chat, because I also have an evening meeting next week as well. So we will just adapt and make this sewing time happen whenever we can work it in. And that's the beauty about these YouTube sessions, is that you can just turn on the replay in the background if you're sewing by yourself and need some company. I'm here for you. Okay, so that was the first. This is actually the very bottom of the quilt. And I've got my little labels on the rows at the end. And once I get it all done, I don't need to worry about each row as I pressing these. I can wait till the end and just press all the seams, all the horizontal seams in one direction once I get it all together. So that is nice. But now I've got my big pinning project. So I will grab my next two rows. Like I said, I didn't have enough pins to do multiple rows because there are so many intersections on this quilt that I want to keep straight. So the way I'm doing this, I pinned my labels so that the writing is right side up for me. So I'm going to lay this bottom strip out first. And then I will orient the top next to it. And you can see how these browns are going to line up together to make those diagonals in the quilt. And everything is looking pretty good. So then I'll just flip that over right sides together. And here is the edge of the first block where the seams will nest. So I'm going to get that first intersection pinned. And then I'm going to come all the way down to the other end of my row. These are about 12 blocks wide, and do the same thing. I'm going to pin the intersection of that final block. And I'm just going to go and pin each block, and then I will come back and pin the inner components where some of the intersections meet. And some of these, for some reason, are, oh, because that one didn't necessarily want to press the way I intended. So we'll just make that behave. I'm going to have to give that a little more attention. It's not wanting to stay nested there. I always check the back side. I pin the front, making sure my pin is right on my stitching line, and then I make sure it is on the stitching line on the back so that those are together. Hi, Joan. I am working on this quilt. It's called Dry Brush, and it was a quilt from Hancock's a few years ago using Wilmington fabrics. So I don't know if it's available online anywhere. Here's the color photo. So it's a really pretty medallion type design. The other nice thing about this quilt is that the kit came with just straight yardage. They gave you big prints or big pieces of each print, and then you had to cut all your strips in small pieces. So that means they were generous with their fabric allowances. And I've got leftovers. So the blues, of course, can go in my stash for Quilts of Valor. I always keep red, white, and blue fabric on hand. That's my kind of default color scheme. If I can't decide what color to make things, I just make it patriotic, and then I know I can donate it when I'm done. And the browns might be useful for a masculine quilt too. So we'll see. I'll have to ask my local organization, because I know when I first started out with Quilts of Valor, they would accept masculine quilts that were not patriotic. But lately, all the photos I've seen online of Quilts of Valor have been patriotic colorways. So, like I said, I'll just ask my local organization if they would like something like this. But yeah, that 9 patch with the alternate half square triangles really makes a fun 3D block. Now I've got all the main blocks pinned, and now I have to go back and pin these smaller bits that weren't necessarily pressed to nest. I just pressed them so that the block would lay flat. But that's the nice thing sometimes about letting a project sit, is that everything's pressed and it's like it gets flatter with age. Welcome, Jess. How are you doing tonight? I hope all of my friends in the South and the North are surviving this wild winter weather. Okay, changing our question a little bit, as we've been talking about whips and UFOs. How do you organize them and decide what you're going to work on? I like to keep my ongoing projects in some kind of bag or dedicated container. For this project, I have an old kind of vinyl plastic bag that I was able to actually, it's really cute. Let me turn this paper over so you can see the logo on the bag. It says Quilting with Altitude from Flagstaff, Arizona. That's one of the mountain towns in the north area of Arizona where NAU, Northern Arizona University, is. We all escape to Flagstaff in the summer for the nice cool temperatures. And of course, if we wanted to show our kids snow, we would go up to Flagstaff. I have not been up in the snow in many, many years. But I spent my 20s in Colorado and South Dakota and Iowa, or Idaho, not Iowa, Idaho. So I have had my share of blizzards. Thank you very much. Anyway, so back to our storage question, staying organized. I like to keep my stuff in containers. So whether that's a project bag or even a Ziploc, you know, they make those nice 2-gallon Ziplocs now that are awesome. Oh my goodness, Jess, no school. That can be fun, you know, for the first day or so, but longer than that, I'm sure as a teacher, you really start worrying about where you're going to end up in lesson plans and things. Yeah, storage containers, the nice like scrapbooking 13-inch boxes that are 3 inches deep. Those are perfect for quilt projects. But yeah, a lot of times it's just Ziploc bags. And sometimes if my local shop does personalized bags, you know, with their shop logo, I'll get one of those to support the shop, and it definitely does keep me organized. To be able to keep all the fabric close by for one project, keep the instructions handy. That way you're not scrambling. And then I do like to rotate my projects. So as you join me for these WIP Wednesdays, you will see that I try to vary the projects that I'm working on. Last week, I was working on Floral States of America. That was a cotton cuts kit. And that's just a block of the month. So I can get that done on one Wednesday and then have time the next week to work on something different. And I feel like I have a little bit of quilter's ADD. I jump from project to project and I have several going at one time. which is part of the reason why I don't finish as much as I'd like, because when you do rotate projects, it's easy to start something new and put it in rotation as well. That delays all the finishing. So, as I said, my mantra for 2025 is to finish more than I start. So I definitely want to get these things done. Okay, a couple more pins, and then I can sew this big strip together. Okay, as I said, I pinned every intersection and I used all of my pins. So I do have pins left in this pin cushion, but some of these are old pins that I've collected, I don't know, from somewhere. And they're too thick and just bulky, too heavy to use in my quilt. And these with the orange and green tips, I do use occasionally. They're the longer clover pins. I like these tiny ones. If you can see them on that project, they have yellow and blue glass heads. They're clover glass head silk pins, and they're just the short ones with the yellow and blue tips. And those are my favorite pins for quilting because they are nice and sharp and fine. Anything else I find is too thick, too big. Oh, shoe boxes. Yes, Joan, that would be great for. I use shoe boxes a lot to store my scraps, my 1.5 inch, 2.5, that kind of stuff. I find very useful, but I tend not to buy shoes as much anymore. My daughter's, in college, so she's stable. It's not like when she was little and you had to buy shoes every few months. But yeah, we do have to stay organized. And I am contemplating a huge destash, get rid of all my scraps and just keep fabric for the projects I'm working on, not have to have this room full of fabric. And there are so many intersections in this quilt that I want to stop approaching every square to make sure that my seams lay flat and I don't get things all twisted and turned around. So that's why it seems like there's a lot of starting and stopping. And then, of course, when the fabric flips up over the foot, get a little bit of bulge in that section. Couldn't quite ease that one in the way I wanted to. So many things to think about when you're quilting. You've got your seams, the way the fabric's laying, Is it even and flat? Where's the pin? Are you maintaining your 1/4 inch? Here's another one that wants to buckle a little bit. You know how you have to put some tension on your fabrics if they're not exactly matched up and laying flat. And when you only have a few inches to work with, it's kind of hard to ease things in. If you've got longer pieces of fabric, you can play that stretching game a little bit better to make sure things lay flat and don't pleat. And I'll have to adjust my camera even more so that you can see what's happening on my sewing machine instead of just my ear. So motion warning, let me get this angled even better and you can see what I'm doing there on the edge of my machine. I always get questions about my sewing machine. This is a Baby Lock Aria, and it's got a little bit of an embroidery module, but I keep it pretty much on a straight stitch setting. Okay, so Joan, these were the different blocks in the pattern. We have a blue and a brown version that is a 9 patch. So, and no, I did not design this. This was a pattern from Wilmington Fabrics. I'm trying to hold up the logo there. And we have a light, medium, and dark in that block with the 2 half square triangles in the corner and the chain running across the center. So that was the blue version. And there's the brown version. And then there's several different combinations of fabric in the half square triangle 4 patches. Yeah, Rita, is a lot of times when I'm doing basic piecing, I never use pins, but with these long rows, I need to use pins to keep everything straight. Hello, Amber. Good to see you. Do you use pins then on long rows, or do you just build out your quilt without it? You certainly would be able to do that because I used a method that I learned from a quilter years ago called 2Z 4Z. And when you have your whole quilt laid out, you can just, sew a 2 patch and then a 4 patch, and then take those bigger 4 patches and sew 2 together and 4 together. And that way you don't have these long rows of intersections to worry about. But oh, wow. Rita even made a Bargello without pins. So, yeah, Deb, you're the trendsetter. Everybody's following you around today. Thank you for stopping by at True Blue Quilts. So here is what the rows look like. I'll hold it up here on my side, and you can sort of see that medallion start working. It's going to be on, figure out where my camera is. See how all of the rows are coming to a point. It's kind of like a on point square in the center of, and then it ripples out with these different color combinations. So yeah, I'm not a pink floral type of woman. I like these blues and browns, and that's why we're True Blue Quilts. Okay, so that row can get set aside. And just to stay organized, everybody, I put if you look over on the workspace camera, I labeled all my rows. I just pinned, I couldn't find sticky notes, and the sticky notes aren't going to stick to fabric for long term anyway. So I just pinned a piece of paper and I put an arrow for which direction I wanted to press the rows. Oh, we've got some legit kit fans. Nice. Okay, so then I need to get this row, my 4s, and then I have 3s, and then we'll start putting other pieces together. Those right sides together. And I find this when I am pinning or clipping my binding too, that I'll pin and pin and pin for 20 minutes, and then it takes 2 minutes to actually sew the seam. So I pin the ends and one in the middle to keep that in place. And then here's the other end. Then I can go back across and fill in all the other squares. And then I start throwing pins around and have to do a good cleanup later so that I have shoes on today. Sometimes I sew in just my socks and slippers, so I want to be careful if any pins are on the floor. I have one of those magnet wands. Those are very, very handy for cleaning up your sewing space. Catching up on yes, clips and paper tape. Good idea, Rita, for labeling things so you don't have to have pins stuck in projects. My family has learned it's kind of cute if I've got a project like a quilt top. When I did the woven star top last fall, I took it downstairs and ripped all the papers off in front of the TV one afternoon, and I left the quilt top on a chair, and my daughter came in, and she kind of was at a safe distance, and she said, "Are there pins in that?" Because they've been surprised sometimes if I'm doing hand binding or something that has a lot of pins, and they go to pick it up and it attacks them. But I try to warn them when I have left something laying around that might have pins in it. But that's life with a quilter, I suppose. And we are getting close to quilt show time. I know Road to California is this week, so I've got friends over there that are some of the vendors I know. Some of my local friends are taking classes, and it just, they're as spectators. Now, how did I was wondering why I ran out of pins, but that's because they're still in this row. I didn't take them out as I was sewing. So I need to do that so that I can put the next set together. And then there's an online conference coming up. It's called Quilted. And I am going to have a session on half rectangle triangles. I hope you join us for that. It will be available online. I think you have at least 24 hours after the initial session goes live. So if you can't attend during the day, that's fine. You can catch up in the evenings. And sometimes I like watching the replays because you can do the 2 times the speed and get through the content a little bit faster. But free tickets to that are in the video description below. Quilted, the virtual summit. So I hope you grab your free ticket and join us. There's over 25 different presentations on all types of different quilt topics. Different piecing techniques, different finishing, free motion quilting, design, self-care topics. So lots of good stuff. And there is an option with the Quilted Summit. You can upgrade your ticket to a video replay option. And so you have a longer time period, like you'll have access for 6 months if you purchase the upgrade, the all access pass type. Oh, Rita says, yes, there is a long list of presentations for the Quilted Summit. I have one last question for folks. If you care to share, have you counted up how many UFOs you have lately? Oh, and Amber's going to share her Allie the Gator kind of a collage applique crumb quilt. I can't remember how you described that, Amber. It's super, super cute. Oh, my question, yes, rude. You'd never ask a lady the size of her stash. UFOs fall in the same category, but I shared several of my UFOs on a video last week. I have my jelly chain, 2 block of the months for cotton cuts. I'm going to be starting another block of the month. Flyway starts in February. So I'm already up to 4. I've got my woven stars to put borders on and finish. So that's 5. This dry brush is 6. I've got one with curves that I was working on last weekend. That's 7. And I know I have many, many more. I mean, that's just ones that I haven't finished piecing. And I've got, once they get finished piecing, they go sit at the long arm because I'm busy doing customer quilts on the long arm. Oh, Rita, no, it is not a bad thing at all if you don't have any UFOs. Different style. I am just a kind of make all the things all at once type person. Oh, wow. Jess, is that going to be part of a upcoming video with all of the tops that you made last year? That's amazing. And Rita, your discipline is fabulous. I would like to get to that stage to just work on one project start to finish and then move on to the next thing. Jess, I laid out all of my unfinished tops one time on my long arm. And then I think I put them in a bin, and I don't think I've quilted any of them. And that was, oh gosh, 10 years ago. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see. How many more intersections do I need to pin? Get this last row done. Didn't get that seam actually lined up. So when I pinned it, it was not nested at all. Okay, that's better. I'm going to remember to take the pins out as I go so that I have them available to do the next long row. I also like to alternate the quilts that I'm working on so that you, my audience, don't get bored seeing the same quilt for weeks and weeks. We went through that last fall when I was doing the woven heart quilt, and that was like a 6-week project. And I would say that is the hardest part about having a YouTube channel for quilting, because it takes so long to make a quilt that it's hard to show fresh stuff because you just physically can't finish a quilt that fast. Or at least I can't, because I still have a day job that does not involve quilting, unfortunately. But if you're ever curious about the business or pattern writing side of quilting, then I invite you to listen to my podcast, Quilting on the Side. We just released the first episode of season 4 today. So you can either listen to that audio on Apple Podcast or Spotify, or watch it over on YouTube, Quilting on the Side podcast. And since it's January 21st, 22nd today, we are just 1 month away from QuiltCon. So I invite you all to come to my neighborhood here in Phoenix, Arizona for the show put on by the Modern Quilt Guild, QuiltCon. They alternate East Coast, West Coast, and we're lucky enough that they are in Phoenix this year. I am so excited. I will be there every day. So if you are coming to town, please let me know so that we can meet in person. I've got some ideas for fun dinner options. Probably just have lunch there at the convention center. Or eat and before I get down there, because I do have to work in the mornings. And things don't kick off at the convention center until 9 or 10 o'clock. So I won't miss too much if I get there between 11 and 12. And if anyone wants to chat about the logistics of running a YouTube channel, I started a Discord server copying the guy who sews, who has a quilt guild on Discord. It's kind of like a Facebook message board, but without all the other ads and stuff. It's devoted just to talking about quilting on video. Send me an email or leave a comment. I can't see the chat comments afterwards, so you'll have to go back and comment on a different video and say, hey, Andy, invite me to Discord, and I'll send you the link for that. Yes, Jess, Quilting on the Side. So when you have a free moment and want to hear more about the quilt business stuff, tune into that podcast. Rita, I'm reading some of your comments. I missed something about turning a hobby into a business. Oh, you did that with computers. Yeah, it's definitely something that people are hesitant about. They may not want to turn something they love into their primary business and feel pressured to make money from it. But I just had the itch to see if I could do it. So that was fun. Joan, which pattern are you looking for? The 4 bits? There's the main image of it has like blue triangles, and then right below that, where it talks about the mystery, it says download the pattern here. That is the paid option. If you participated on New Year's Day, then I have a private link that I can send you. So just reach out to info@truebluequilts.com and I'll send you the direct link. Yeah, you just have to get in touch with me via email. Let's see. I need to scroll back and look at some of these comments. Oh yeah, using codes. Rita, I'm looking back at your question, the normal time for doing a quilt. I'm not sure what time frame I mentioned. Um, I have done quilts in a day. If I have a fairly easy jelly roll type pattern, I can get that done in a day. If I'm on a retreat, I can get a project done. Usually, if I'm dedicated just with my own work schedule, I can get one done in about 6 weeks ish. Oh, dry brush. This pattern is not on my website. This was a kit that I inherited from a friend, and it came with the hard copy pattern. And so I'm just doing this for fun for myself. It is not one of my own that's for sale. I know I probably confuse people when I have my own designs for sale and then I work on something totally unrelated. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but like Rita was saying, sometimes we need to separate our hobby from our business. So this is one of those projects that's just for me. Okay, there was that row. So I managed to get 3 sets sewn together, and you start counting how many more of these long seams I have to go. Probably 5 or 6 before I get the whole quilt together. So that is my dry brush progress. Again, this was a pattern from Wilmington Prints. So if you want to do some investigation with those keywords, dry brush, Wilmington Prints. And yeah, I am going to wrap up and put my quilting away, get on to the next event. Scheduling note, next week will probably be a morning live, if any, because I do have some other meetings that I need to get to on Wednesday evening. And I know there is a wide array of quilt along live streams on YouTube almost every night of the week, and several on Saturday and Sunday. So I'm sure you can find other quilting friends to hang out with, but I will definitely be back in February, and I have some regular long form videos coming out, and those will get released on Saturday. So have a good week, everyone. I'll see you soon. Bye.